spot Ether ETFs moving to the downside in their second day of trading. The ETF saw over $1 billion in volume during their first trading day. To put that into context, spot Bitcoin ETFs pulled in $4.5 billion in volume during that same time period. Joining me now to discuss what's next is ETF expert Dave Nadig as part of the ETF report brought to you by Invesco QQQ. Dave, like we were just saying, we saw a very successful rollout of the spot Bitcoin ETFs earlier this year, but the debut of the Ether ETFs is definitely more muted. So do you expect those inflows to pick up over time?
Well, I think it's okay to think about Bitcoin and ETH as sort of being two sides of the same crypto investor coin. I think Bitcoin is always going to have that position as digital gold, and I think it's going to be the primary asset most non-crypto native investors look to when they're looking for a little crypto exposure. I think the smart move for most investors is to think about diversifying across the available crypto assets. So what I'm hearing from a lot of folks is that the kind of trade-off we're seeing right now, where the ETH products are about 10 to 20% of what we're seeing in the Bitcoin products, that's actually a pretty reasonable diversification strategy. Putting, say, $500 in the Bitcoin space and maybe $100 or $200 in the ETH space, that really does give you access to two very, very different parts of the crypto market. So I think what we've seen on day one is probably pretty similar to what we're going to see over the course of this year. Right now, we're sitting at about $60 billion in the Bitcoin ETF complex, about $10 billion after yesterday in the ETH complex, largely because Grayscale mapped over their big closed fund into a new ETF. That ratio of maybe 60 to 10, 50 to 10, that feels like the right ratio.
And what about the price action that we saw in Ether? Because after those ETFs debuted for Bitcoin, we saw Bitcoin really skyrocket, but we didn't see that same price action for Ether. So why was that? And do you expect the price to tick up over time?
Well, I think there's a bit of a sell the news here, right? After the incredible success of those early Bitcoin ETFs, everybody was looking at these ETH ETFs as the next shoe to drop. There was a lot of price action in Ether running up into this launch. There was a lot of speculation really up until a few weeks ago about whether we would see these now or sometime between now and the end of the year, or even not until next year. So there was still a lot of uncertainty here. Now that they're here, I think it's not unreasonable to think that some folks are selling the news. So we have seen ETH take it on the chin a little bit. We've seen Bitcoin take it on the chin a little bit too. So we haven't seen that kind of new money flowing in. I think it's worth pointing out that yesterday, the launch day for these products, while we had $107-ish million show up in the new ETFs, we had about $87 million come out of the Bitcoin ETF. So it's, is that money selling Bitcoin to buy ETH? I think there's a reasonable chance that's true.